Good morning. I wanted to do just a very brief review for the midterm exam coming up because I do want you to use your study guide and your text. It's pretty straightforward, 25 multiple choice questions worth 1 point each. And so everything that you will be expected to know is already listed on your study guide. But just quickly to take a look at your study guide. And we start with the intro, which covered the first couple chapters on the background of sport and exercise psychology. And I'm just going right straight through the study guide. And you can look up the answers. And in many cases, the answer is already right there on your study guide. And of course, it's an open book exam, as all of them are. And you can use your notes. And you can put little notes there next to the terms and concepts on your study guide. So under intro, know the difference between educational and clinical sport and exercise psychologists. As it says right there on your study guide, educational, we're deemed to be mental coaches. We work on all the psychological skills, such as the ones we're covering in class, whereas the clinical sport and exercise psychologists deal with a gamut of psychoses, including severe depression, eating disorders, substance abuse, that kind of thing. And the main goal of sports psychology in doing those consultations is self-regulation. The ultimate goal, we are trying to get to their psychological core, which is the deepest, truest part of who you are. It's comprised of your motives, your values, your beliefs, your attitudes, those sorts of things. Big chunk of the questions will come from our chapter on self-confidence. So think of confidence and self-efficacy as one and the same. The other important thing is unshakable self-belief. So we haven't really gotten into mental toughness, but just know that will be on the midterm. The most important mental toughness attribute is having an unshakable self-belief. Know Dr. Albert Bandura's sources of self-efficacy. He is the one that did most of our work on self-efficacy, and so he tells us how to gain confidence or self-efficacy. So go back in that chapter and be sure that you know his 6 sources of self-efficacy. The primary source of self-efficacy, as we've talked about, is recalling past accomplishments, previous success. Also, as we look at his sources of self-efficacy, we see performance accomplishments, first of all, and secondly, vicarious experience modeling. Roger Bannister is the prime example of vicarious experience modeling. He's the guy that broke the 4-minute mile. And after he broke the 4-minute mile, even though it had been deemed to be humanly impossible, within the end of the year, another 30 runners broke the 4-minute mile. Following year, almost 300. So that's a really great example of vicarious experience and modeling. And then Bandura tells us the 4 stages of modeling. So Bandura's 4 stages of modeling are attention, retention, motor or muscle reproduction, and then motivation. Learned helplessness is an acquired condition whereby an individual believes that he or she has no control over the desired outcome. If you have trait confidence, it means that's more constant and stable. You're confident most of the time. State is also dubbed situational. It's more dynamic and changing. We see that again under personality, as well as the concept of hardiness. Hardiness, the complete opposite of learned helplessness. Now, this is a personality trait. You're born with it. So hardiness is a personality trait that enables an individual to withstand or cope with adversity or stressful situations. Profile of mood states, POMS. It's a test that we can administer to determine whether an individual will have a successful outcome. Self-concept is how you see yourself, your self-perception. And if, hint, hint, if you were to see this quote on an exam, if you think you can or think you can't, you're probably right. That is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Under motivation, the definition's right there, the direction and intensity of effort. Attribution theory, the definitions again on your exam study guide already, how an individual explains success or failure. Competence motivation, they're on your study guide. It's a perception, and it's the connection between the sense of control, self-worth, as well as feedback and reinforcement. A perception, connection between sense of control, self-worth, and feedback and reinforcement. Professors, teachers, coaches want to instill intrinsic motivation in their students and their athletes. It's more long-lasting. It's self-reference. People that are intrinsically motivated want to succeed for personal satisfaction, personal growth, whereas if an individual is extrinsically motivated, they are more motivated by the external rewards such as fame, fortune, money, trophies, that sort of thing. Under exercise and psychological well-being, you could go back and look at all the things that are listed on your study guide. Acute versus chronic. Chronic is more long-lasting. You have a sound mind and a sound body, whereas acute is more like a runner's high. It happens quickly, but not long-lasting. Hardiness is there again because the more fit you are, the more hardy you are, the more able you are to cope with adversity. I will on the test describe one of the stages of change under the trans-theoretical model, so go back in your text and review what those stages are, beginning with pre-contemplation, the individuals who aren't even thinking about exercising, to the final one, which is termination, meaning those individuals have been exercising regularly 3 to 5 times a week for at least 5 years. So it's part of the fabric of their life. They'll probably always stay active. One of the interesting stages is contemplation, where the individuals seriously intend to begin an exercise program within the next 6 months, but oftentimes never begin for at least 2 years. Know this under goals, know the SMARTS system, know what each of those stand for. Group and team dynamics, know everything that's listed there. Steiner's model of actual productivity. I've posted, it's been on there, some of the PowerPoints and in some cases videos where I already tell you what the Steiner's model of actual productivity. I'll have that on the test with a blank. And again, it's multiple choice. Pick out what goes into that blank. And then faulty group processes, know what they are. It's when an individual, so the 2 reasons that a team doesn't reach their full potential is usually lack or loss of motivation, lack and loss of timing and coordination. Then remember the Ringelmann effector theory. He's the guy who over 100 years conducted that tug of war. And his determination was that as we continue to add more participants, the level of effort diminishes. So he's looking at the relationship between individuals and a team or group setting. And so when an individual on the team gives less than 100% effort, that's social loafing. Also remember Norman Triplett. We kind of learned about him back in one of the first 2 chapters. He was the cyclist up in Indiana who determined that a biker will cycle faster, is more motivated if he or she is biking against at least one other person rather than just alone or against a clock. Communication, know the 4 types of self-talk, positive, motivational, negative, instructional, and cue words. Cue words are prompts to make you think in a positive way. Know the difference between intrapersonal and interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication is dialogue between you and at least one other person, whereas intrapersonal communication is self-talk. Active listening is the most important part of effective communication. You're acknowledging, providing feedback, giving eye contact. It's nonverbal is involved as well. The sandwich approach is the most effective way to provide constructive criticism. Look at CBAS, Coaches Behavior Assessment. That's also under the leadership chapter. It's a way that we can determine whether a coach effectively communicates with his or her team. Know the 2 different behaviors, spontaneous and reactive. Spontaneous is when a coach provides some kind of feedback that has nothing to do with a mistake. It doesn't follow a mistake. Whereas reactive